And so when he saw that massive value, I mean, that trip cost, the cash price would have been around $35,000. And we paid for hotels and airfare out of pocket. We only paid about $1,500. So that'll wake you up right there.
Hey there, Points people. You just heard a clip from Mary Ellen from the Wonderland on Points podcast. You can also find her on Instagram at Family Travel for the Win. Mary Ellen is a nurse educator by day and busy mom and points and miles enthusiast on the side. She co-hosts the Wonderland on Points podcast with her partner in crime, Joanna. They focus on budget travel and helping families achieve the travel dreams they never thought possible thanks to points and miles. In this episode, expect to hear about Mary Ellen's amazing trip to Switzerland on points, tips for saving on travel in notoriously expensive destinations, when you most definitely do not want to go for the cheapest option, and so much more. And if you are looking to maximize your points so you can travel like Mary Ellen, you can request a free personalized tutorial video for your next points trip at geobreezetravel.com/request. We pick one free tutorial to prepare every week, which you'll find in the free GeoBreeze Travel newsletter. So make sure you open our newsletter every Monday to see if your request was the one that we picked and prepared. And now, on with the show. Hey, Mary Ellen, welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel podcast.
Hey, Julia, it's so nice to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here and to talk about your amazing trip that your family took to Switzerland using points. But before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how did you get into the wonderful world of points and miles?
Yes. So I am a nurse educator by day. So I have a day job that is not in the world of points and miles, although I do host Wonderland on Points podcast. Nursing is my full-time gig. I love teaching nursing students. And before going to nursing school, I was actually a teacher. So it combined both my previous professional jobs, and it's become a really great fit for me. But nursing is a very challenging job, and it's a job that you really need to have breaks to kind of rejuvenate yourself. And so points and miles has been a real blessing and a perfect thing for me because I do need to travel and explore. I have a creative side that wants to get out and see the world, and I couldn't do that otherwise. So I really got into points and miles by necessity. I wanted to travel, but I couldn't afford it. I mean, there was no way that I could afford it. So I just stumbled upon it one day, started watching videos, learning more. I have a little bit of ADHD in me, so I kind of hyper-focused on it, went deep down the rabbit hole, and it has been the most exciting blessing in my life. It really was completely unexpected, and I've just been so grateful for it.
Incredible. How long ago was it when you first discovered the world of points and miles?
Cannot remember. I can't keep track. We first opened a credit card for the points to go on a flight a good maybe 8 or 9 years ago, but we really did not know what we were doing. So we did use those points. We booked a flight to Canada, went to Banff and Yoho National Parks, which were unbelievable. But we did not know about transfer partners. We booked it in the portal, which was fine. We got some value, but we didn't get what we could have probably gotten. So that was my first taste, but that was before I went all in myself. It's probably been about 5 years that I really learned how to maximize my points.
Your first maximizing, tell us a little bit about your first ever redemption with transferable points. And you were like, oh, instead of using the portal, we should move points over here instead. Tell us about that redemption.
Oh, wow. I would have to think really hard. It's so weird that I don't even remember the first redemption at this point. I do know that my husband is more of a reluctant player too, if you will. So for him, the trip that we're going to dig into a little bit today, Switzerland, was probably the first time that his eyes really opened to it. And he thought, oh, okay. I mean, he just opened this week an American Airlines credit card. He'll open what I tell him to open, but he doesn't go all in on himself. But he does see the value now. After this Switzerland trip, that was so much luxury. We do a lot of budget travel with our family, but Switzerland was just the two of us. And so when he saw that massive value, I mean, that trip cost, the cash price would have been around $35,000. And we paid for hotels and airfare out of pocket. We only paid about $1,500. So that'll wake you up right there.
For sure. So you said you guys have been at this roughly 8 years, but deep dive into 5 years. And the entire time your husband's still been a little bit reluctant until the Switzerland trip. What is your advice for anybody who might be going through the same thing, where they're like, I'm really trying to get my partner on board. They are not super impressed with just the domestic flights that we're getting for free right now. What would you advise those people to do?
They definitely need to see the value for themselves. My husband is a scientist. He likes data, he likes spreadsheets. All of our trips, he maps out with a beautiful spreadsheet. So making him see that definitely helps. But another thing we did, thanks to points and miles, so we do not live anywhere near Minnesota, but he grew up a lifelong Minnesota Vikings fan, diehard fan. And so with Southwest Companion Pass, once we got that, we started being able to go to more Minnesota Vikings games because we could take our kids for free. They could fly with us for free. That was something that he really thought was special. So Switzerland was my dream, right? That was a trip that I always wanted to take. But going to more Minnesota Vikings game, that's up his alley. So I would say figure out what your player two is passionate about, make their dream travel happen, and then they'll see the value.
That is fantastic advice. Where a lot of people, I think that they optimize for something like the ANA around the world trip, which doesn't even exist anymore. But they're like, if I can cram 15 flights for us into 2 months and get business class and be like, we saved $100,000, that might not be what your partner wants to optimize for. So I
Right?
completely agree with finding what's important to them, what would really open their eyes up instead of just being like, honey, we got 15 or 16 cents per point. Most people don't know what that is. They don't
Right.
really
True.
care. All right. So let's jump into a little bit of the Switzerland redemption that you've recently took. What came across your, I guess, travel dashboard or your Instagram feed? What inspired you to book this?
Okay, this is fun. This is a very full circle moment for me because your podcast was one of the first ones that I ever got into when I was learning about points and miles. And I mean, it's been years now. I don't know how many years back this was, maybe at least 3 years back. You had a Switzerland episode focused on Switzerland. I remember getting out a notebook, a pen, paper. I mean, I was taking notes all through that episode. And that was the moment that I said I had wanted to go to Switzerland for years, my whole life, really. But 10 years I had truly been wanting to go, but it seemed like a pipe dream. It seemed unattainable. That episode, I wrote down notes, and that was the moment I said, this is going to happen. And I started saving up points and miles with purpose and with that goal of Switzerland, and we made it happen. And so now to come back and talk about it on your podcast and share some updates, and we did different things that were highlighted in that first episode, but it's really special because that really was what started it for me with this specific trip.
That is incredible. That episode was featuring Kevin Zanes. He currently lives in Switzerland with his wife and 4 children. So after moving there from Indiana, yeah, many years ago, that is an incredible full circle moment. So tell us, how did you do this? Let's start with flights. How did you book your flights? What kind of points did you use? Where did you transfer them? Tell us all the details for somebody who is now taking notes and wants to do this for themselves, and then they'll come back onto this podcast 3 years from now and tell us about it.
Yes. That would be my greatest joy. I love in points and miles, and I'm sure you have the same experience. I love when people come back and tell me that they did a trip based on, one of our podcasts or advice that they saw from me online. So I would love that. So what we did, we fly from the DC area. So I used American Express membership rewards, and I'm pretty sure all of our flights were with membership rewards. We flew Air France on the way there, and we did fly business class. That was our very first business class experience on Air France. It was lovely. Of course, the food is phenomenal in Air France. I love, croissants, and I love food that's bad for you. So Air France was a good one. I'm also a picky eater. And so some of the international airlines, their high-end food is probably not actually in my palate, but Air France was perfect. And so I loved the whole experience. My biggest complaint was that it was too short of a trip because I wanted to soak in every minute of it. And so I wanted to eat dinner. I wanted to eat breakfast. I didn't want to miss any of it. So I didn't actually sleep as much as I could have on the lie flat seats. I did sleep for a few hours, but that trip retailed for two people. So one person, I'll do the math in my head. One person would have been about $6,000, and we paid 70,000 points each. So 140,000 points, and taxes and fees were $448. So it wasn't as good, it wasn't the best ever business class redemption, but it was our first time and it was still pretty good. So for us, this was a big 15-year anniversary trip. So it had a lot of special meaning to us. So we were willing to splurge. Again, I mentioned this before. We do a lot of budget family travel. We do not fly business class a lot because we want our miles and our points to stretch even further for a family of 5. So it was very special. On the way back, we did a little better. We flew Iberia business class, which is not as nice, I would say, as Air France. It gets a little bit of a bad rap. I don't think it's not as premium as a lot of other airlines, but we had a great experience, especially as somebody who had not flown business class before. I am not a luxury person. I don't need the highest of standards. Anything is better than the economy on American Airlines that I would otherwise be flying. So for that flight, we only paid 50,000 points each. We did capitalize on a transfer bonus. I think it was a 30% transfer bonus. So the actual flights might have been a little bit more, but I have written in my notes 50,000 points each. And the taxes and fees were $384. So still round trip to pay, it was only about $700, $800 total for two people, business class round trip. We thought that was fantastic.
That is fantastic. With your outbound Air France flight, did it ticket all the way into Switzerland, or did you get off in Paris and then book a separate flight? How did that work?
So we did have to change planes in Paris, but it was all on one. We didn't stop in Paris. We didn't do any kind of stopover or spend any time in Paris. We just got on the next plane. And we flew into Geneva. So our itinerary kind of took us across Switzerland. So we flew into Geneva, traveled around Switzerland on trains, and then out of Zurich. So the flight from Paris to Geneva was very quick, but it was still first class. But it's more of a domestic feeling first class, but they still brought us a full breakfast in the very short time of that flight. I was very impressed with what we got for that experience.
How about the Iberia one? Was that ticketed all the way through, or did you do a separate positioning flight between Switzerland and Spain?
We did fly through Madrid. So we went from Zurich to Madrid. We left the airport. We had maybe 8 hours. And so we did leave the airport. Our son is a very big soccer fan, or football, I guess I should be saying. And so we went and got him a jersey for his favorite player while we were in Madrid. And he has worn that jersey. My husband just said this was the greatest decision we ever made to leave that airport and go get it, because he has worn that jersey almost every day in the past year since we've been back. So it was very worth it. It was really cool to see a taste of Madrid. So we just went around for a few hours. It was very different than Switzerland, even just the train from the airport into Madrid. We were in Switzerland, everything was on time. Everything was so reliable. It was such a beautiful thing. And Madrid was a little bit trickier, which gave me a lot of anxiety leaving the airport, knowing we needed to get back for our international flight home. I will say we did make it back to the airport in plenty of time. And the lounge in Madrid, because we had business class seats on Iberia, the Iberia lounge was beautiful. It was spacious. We really enjoyed our time in that lounge.
Very nice. Yeah, I think when a lot of people are like, I need to get to this specific destination in Europe, or even from a specific airport in the United States, a lot of times positioning flights help. You guys are flying from the DC area, so that's already a major airport. But if somebody needs to fly into, let's say, Marseille, France, and there's not really direct flights from the US to Marseille, Air France does oftentimes include the positioning flight within Europe at no extra points cost, just as long as there's availability. So if anyone listening to this is trying to connect to somewhere smaller in Europe where there's not a lot of good direct flights to or from the US, especially a lot of like southern Italy is this way. Everybody wants to go to the Amalfi Coast, Sardinia, all of that. Check Air France, because sometimes they will have availability ticketed all the way through for no extra points cost.
Yeah, and I think I would fly Air France again too with my children. This trip, as I mentioned, was only my husband and I, but because they offer a discount for children, it's really a great choice for families.
Absolutely. And I don't know if your kids are under 12, but there is that 25%
Yes.
discount on points.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was speaking of. My son just turned 12, unfortunately. So he's about to age out of that situation. But I have two more kids under 12. So it's still on my radar.
Very nice. All right. Now that we've covered flights, let's talk about hotels. Where did you stay in Switzerland?
So we moved around quite a bit. We stayed in Lausanne our first couple nights, and that was at the Lausanne Palace, which is part of the Amex Fine Hotels and Resorts program. We stayed there for 2 nights. It was beautiful. We'll say it's not necessarily, the rooms aren't super updated, but we kind of took that into all of the old Europe charm. And they knew it was our anniversary, so they put rose petals everywhere. I laughed. I was like, do they know this is our 15th anniversary and not our honeymoon? A little different, but they really played it up for us, which was lovely, and chocolate covered strawberries and all that. With the Fine Hotels and Resorts program, you do get a special welcome amenity, and they did that. The breakfast buffet every morning was divine, which was included through booking through that program. And a room upgrade, we had this huge balcony. It was perfect. So we kind of based there for a couple days and then did day trips on trains. And then we ventured over to Interlaken, which is a nice hub for a lot of adventure activities. That was our hub when we went paragliding. There's a ton of beautiful things in that region. That hotel we booked through the Capital One travel portal, and I have a Capital One Venture X card. So I used my $300 travel credit to help cover the 2 nights we spent in Interlaken. And then we worked our way over to Lucerne. We stayed a night there at a hotel I booked through hotels.com. That hotel we paid for, there's an app called Fetch where you scan receipts and you can cash in your points for gift cards. So I cashed in for some hotels.com gift cards to cover that night in Lucerne. Then we went up, probably the nicest, or I wouldn't say nicest, the coolest hotel that we have ever stayed at in our lives was on top of Mount Pilatus. That was also the more expensive hotel. It was probably $460-ish for the night, which sounds very steep, but it includes for 2 people, 4-course dinner, which was very fancy, candlelight and all of that, massive breakfast buffet for 2 included, and you are staying on top of Mount Pilatus. The cogwheel train that comes up that brings people throughout the day, that stops running. All of the people are gone, and it's only a handful of people staying at the hotels overnight. So you have the top of this mountain over 2,000 meters in the sky. You are on top of clouds. Spectacular, and was worth every penny. So that was the only hotel that we really felt like we paid a lot out of pocket for. Everything else was pretty much covered on points or gift cards. Oh, and
Lots
then
of
Zurich. That one we just stayed at a Hyatt Place by the airport.
Lots of different techniques for this.
Yeah.
So let's start with the FHR credit. How
Okay.
did you know you wanted to use it in Lausanne?
I was looking at the options, right? So I just put in Switzerland in the Amex program website and just saw what was available. And that's what came up. I think I weighed the different options. We really built our trip around hotels in a lot of ways. So once I figured out that was a great option that we could use with that program, I knew I wanted to use that credit for our Amex Platinum to try to get our full value out of the program. And I know it would be really special. I like that credit, even though it can be hard to use. It just makes you feel nice. You don't have status with that hotel, but you feel like you do, and they really pamper you. So we picked the hotel and then planned activities around it.
Very nice. Yeah, if somebody is listening to this and they're struggling with how to maximize their FHR credit, there's this website. It's free. It's called maxfhr.com. You type in where you're going to travel, and you can optionally type in what dates as well. So it'll tell you the cheapest hotels that you can use your FHR credits for. So if you're looking for something that's right around that $200 mark, I was able to stay at the Four Seasons Sydney for a little over $200 by using this website. I did not know that the Four Seasons was that affordable in Sydney. So Max FHR is a good way to find
That's
the
incredible.
best way to use up that credit.
Whenever I'm looking for fine hotels and resorts, that is very much my criteria as well, that it has to be as cheap as possible. I do not choose the ones that are $1,000+ a night. We definitely choose the closest to $200 that we can get.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned the Capital One portal where you used your $300 credit for that. Did you also get 10 points per dollar on anything that wasn't covered by the credit?
I'm pretty sure that we did. Yeah. I don't have that written in my notes, but That makes sense. The hotel was $245 a night. So that second night, we did pay $195 of it. So we would have gotten points for that portion. And there was breakfast included at this hotel. That's another big criteria for me as what hotels I choose. I want free breakfast. I would say on my podcast, free breakfast is my love language. And I'm really bitter about the Hyatt Places of the world, Hyatt House starting to slowly withdraw their free breakfast options because I choose hotels if they have free breakfast.
Yeah, and especially in Switzerland, because there's so many places where if someone's staying in Paris, they're like, well, I don't have Globalist, so I don't have the free breakfast at the Park Hyatt. It's going to be $60 per person for breakfast. I'm like, there's probably a cafe across the street. Just get yourself a croissant and a cafe au lait and you'll be fine. Switzerland, no, everything is expensive. Free breakfast is worth gold there.
Right. Exactly. The food is very pricey in Switzerland. That you really have to factor that in. We made this as budget friendly as possible for the most part. Other than the splurge on top of Mount Pilatus, we ate in mostly budget restaurants. And so free breakfast is because I like it, but it's also very much strategic. It's a strategic move.
With the Capital One portal, if there ever is a boutique hotel that somebody wants to stay at, I have found that it's the portal that gives the most points. If you're like, okay, there's a boutique hotel, I can't use points on it. Where should I book it through? I have found Capital One is a bit better than Chase or Amex just as far as raw number of points you're going to earn.
Yeah, I really love the Capital One travel. It's easy to use. I've been pleased. We're going to use it again. We booked it's a chateau, I believe, in France near Normandy. We're just going very soon, taking the whole family over to Europe with the kids' first time, which is really exciting. But one of our nights is again now this year booked through Capital One Travel. And I'm excited. It gives you some really unique options when you can't use your standard points hotels, right? In places where you don't have Hyatt and Hilton and Marriott and all the other options. It gives you some good local stuff. And I like that.
You mentioned you cashed in a lot of Fetch rewards for hotels.com gift cards as well. How many receipts did you scan to get hundreds of dollars of gift cards? Because Fetch points, I describe these as like really low effort, really low points, where I'm using this for Starbucks gift cards where you're scanning a receipt and you're like, all right, I got like $1 off of that, $1 here, like $1 of points. I always recommend to people if you can just collect receipts from all your neighbors, or just have your kids go around your neighborhood, collect grocery receipts that are a month old or less, and then just take photos of everybody else's receipts. You can get a lot of points that way just from scanning other people's receipts. But how long did it take you to amass this many points? Because it's an easy grind, but it's a slow grind.
Right. Honestly, not as long as you'd think. I try to be thoughtful about it before I leave the grocery store parking lot. Just before I pull out, I go ahead and put the receipt on my lap, snap, take pictures of it, upload it. I try to look in the app. I don't ever want to spend money on things I wouldn't otherwise buy, but I do glance at the app because there are a lot of times where it's like 2,000 bonus points for this or 3,000 for this. So if it's something that makes sense for my family, I'll be strategic about what I buy. Referrals, you can a lot of times get 4,000 points for referrals. So I got some points through that. They also have a way that you can earn points through playing games. One of my best nurse friends who is really into points and miles, she was an inspiration to me at the beginning. She was the first person I ever knew in person who had a Southwest Companion Pass. And so she made it seem very attainable to me too. But I introduced her to Fetch and she said, I give the phone to my boyfriend's nephew and tell him to play games on it because kids love phone games. And so he racks up all these points for her by playing games on Fetch. I've never personally used the games option myself, but it is an option.
If I'm ever seated next to a child on a plane who needs some kind of distraction, maybe I'll just offer them my
There
phone.
you go.
If anybody wants to download Fetch, I think my code is 9E13DF if you guys want like 2,000 bonus points for signing up on that. But yeah, it's super easy to earn points, just might take a while. But I think it'll pay for like a Starbucks drink a week if you're just scanning a grocery receipt every week. Scan your grocery receipt, go to Starbucks, get your free drink, go home.
You know what? A Starbucks drink a week is worth it to me. That's an amount of effort that is worth it to me. That's fun.
Yeah, just take a photo, get your free Starbucks. Or if you're like, I don't need Starbucks, I'm just gonna save them up for a year or so, like Mary Ellen did, and then cash them out for Airbnb gift cards or Delta gift cards or hotels.com gift cards. You can do that too. Amazing. All right. So we talked about Fetch, we talked about the Amex Fine Hotels and Resorts credit, we talked about the Capital One portal, and then you transferred Chase points over to Hyatt for the Hyatt Place when you flew out of Zurich. Let's talk about everything other than hotels, and flights. You mentioned food is pretty expensive in Switzerland, which it is. I can attest to this. What are some tips that you have for people who just get sticker shock at the thought of eating in Switzerland?
So, one thing that we like to do when we travel, as a mom, one of the things that's challenging about motherhood is the constant need to figure out what's for dinner, the constant need to make decisions all day long for a bunch of people. So, when I travel, my husband, this is the biggest blessing to me. I mentioned he loves spreadsheets. He makes a spreadsheet ahead of time. He researches restaurants ahead of time. And before we go anywhere, we have it all outlined. We know exactly where we're eating. I already can look up the menu ahead of time, make sure it's not too pricey, make sure there's something I like. And then when I'm on my trip, it's really a mental break for me because I'm not having to think at all. There's no decision making. It's already been made for me. So we don't get caught in a moment where we're desperately hungry and we just have to get something because we need it right now and end up overspending, right? We already looked up the restaurants. We know how much it's going to cost. We know that it's in our budget and it's planned. Now we leave room for spontaneity. If we see something that we just really want, we will change plans and go for it. But I think a lot of not over blowing your budget is preparation. And I'm not a super organized person. I don't want people to listen to this if you think, oh, I could never do that. I'm not that organized. I'm not either. My husband is, so it helps. But for trips, I tend to hyper focus and organize because I know it's going to pay off in the end. Just having that mental break and not feeling stressed that I'm going over budget because I already know what I'm going to spend. I already looked it up and it's planned.
For sure. What about other expenses that people should take into account before they go into Switzerland? So you need accommodations, food, flights, obviously, the train passes. Any other tips for how to save on miscellaneous expenses, whether it's intra Switzerland transit or excursions or anything else?
So the Swiss travel pass, that's something that on that original episode that I heard about Switzerland was mentioned. So we looked into that and we really did the calculations on it. With the Swiss travel pass, you get some discounts for your train travel and buses and that kind of thing. But you also get some discounts on activities. So there are a lot of activities that are 100% covered. The price is if you have the Swiss travel pass. It's not just for the transportation itself. So, like, we had a rainy day in Lucerne where we walked around, we saw the beautiful things, but it was drizzly. It really wasn't a great day to be outside. So, we looked up, okay, what is included with the Swiss travel pass? What have we already paid for today that we could go do? And we found this museum of video games. My husband is a massive video games fan. It was incredible. It was just a whole gaming museum. They also had like a cafe where you could sit and play board games. We didn't do that part of it. We mainly just did the museum, but he loved it. It was such a hidden gem that it was not on our original well thought out, as I mentioned, itinerary. It was one of our pivots but it was included in the Swiss travel pass. So that was a way that, okay, we had to pivot. This is going to be something out of our budget. Oh, wait, no, make sure to look up what is that going to entitle you to. Can we take advantage of one of these activities? Other activities, some of the bigger activities are just going to be expensive. We rented e-bikes. We wanted to do Via Ferrata. That got rained out. Unfortunately, we have done Via Ferratas in other places. Highly recommend them. They're incredible, but they're not cheap. We went paragliding. Again, this was a 15th anniversary trip for us, and we saved so much money on strategically planning the airfare and hotels that activities are what we were going to splurge on. And just so you're planning, if you're going to do paragliding, I think that's going to be, let's see, I wrote it down, about $240. So that's a big ticket item. Honestly, paragliding is not one of those things that I'm like, I want to find the most budget friendly group that we can do it with. I want the best group. Even if it is more expensive, I want the nicest company. Okay. So about $240 is a fantastic company. You can go paragliding. So keep that in your travel planning. I would highly recommend that. So put that in your budget.
What was the company that you used for this that you'd recommend?
Paragliding Interlaken. And if you just search that, you're not actually going to find the company at first because that seems like too general search terms, but that is their actual name. So their website is paragliding-interlaken.ch.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always concerned about people where they're like, I really need to save money. So I bought LASIK on Groupon. I'm always so concerned with people who are that far down the rabbit hole. I'm like, maybe don't get Groupon LASIK. Maybe don't get paragliding lessons from some guy who
Right.
It's
Out
just
the
like on
back
the
of
side of
his
the boat.
van. Yeah.
He's
Isn't
like,
that
"I'm gonna row this canoe and you're gonna paraglide." And you're like, "Okay, well, I mean, it was cheaper than everybody else." Yeah, that paragliding, skydiving, all of those things, make sure you get a reputable company and not just the cheapest one that you can find. Applies to so many things.
Yes, for sure. I went with a company that I personally knew someone, not just someone online. It was someone I knew in real life, had been to Switzerland. I was like, what is the company that you used? Did you like them? Okay. And so that's how I ended up picking them.
Nice. Any other tips and tricks for people who want to go through Switzerland, take different tours, try different excursions, and not have to sell off an arm and a leg?
Definitely, there's so much beauty in Switzerland everywhere you look. You don't have to spend a lot of money. A lot of the money you're going to spend is on the funiculars up to the top of the mountain, those kind of things where you could hike if you wanted to, but it's easier. Hiking in Switzerland, I love hiking. I told my husband, okay, there's going to be very specific parameters on what I'm willing to hike in Switzerland because that's a different level of hiking than I normally do. There's so much just natural beauty that you don't have to do paid for activities if you don't want to. I mean, really, the most of your cost is going to come in transportation and food. I mean, those are the two biggest things. But one of the things that inspired my trip planning and the activities that we did was I'm a massive K-drama fan. I don't know if you're into K-drama. I am deep into K-drama, and one of my favorite K-dramas of all time is called Crash Landing on You. It is split between Korea, South Korea, or North Korea and Switzerland. And so I wanted to go to the filming locations from Crash Landing on You. It was me and like 1,000 of my closest Korean friends. I definitely stuck out a little bit, was the oddball, but I was so excited. I went to all of the locations that we could from that K-drama, and it was magical to me because that K-drama is so beloved.
I'm getting into it. I haven't seen that one. I like Squid Games, obviously, but also The Glory, I think, is the poetic justice. So good. I'm also currently watching The Extraordinary Attorney Woo,
Yeah,
and I love that one. It's very
I
good.
love that one too. I hope, and a lot of them don't have second seasons. There's more now that I think Netflix and more people all over the world are watching them. Some of them are getting second seasons when maybe they weren't even originally. A lot of them, I like that a lot of K dramas, it's like 16 episodes or 12 episodes, and the full story arc is there, and it's almost like a mini series. It's not meant to have 10 seasons, 15 seasons like Grey's Anatomy or things on US programs, but I love them. I love them so much. You might like Vincenzo. That's one that might be up your alley. There's one called Good Boy that is more current that I've been really into. That's one that both of those are ones that my husband got into. He doesn't like the romance stuff as much, so those have a lot of action.
Very nice. All right. So when you were taking this tour, was it in Korean? Was it in Swiss German? Was this in English? Like, what was this tour like?
Okay, I should say this was a self-made tour. I looked up, there were a couple websites I found that had mapped out the locations. So I wasn't with a tour group. It's just there were so many tourists there that came because of Crash Landing on You. In fact, they had, which is blows my mind. This is how big this drama is. In Switzerland, they have like permanent placards and these giant hearts, these red hearts that say Crash Landing on You because so many tourists have come to see these specific locations. I know that Itzelwald, where there's that dock where the main character was playing piano on it, I think locals, it's definitely a mixed basket, right? Over tourism is a problem, and that's a very small area, beautiful place that they have just been descended upon with people wanting to come see this specific dock because of this drama. But at the same time, it's good for the economy. So, it's always a little bit of a double-edged sword there. But just so many people have come that you will see, and that the people are here for this. Like it's very obvious. And like I said, they have the hearts all over Switzerland so you can find the spots from the show.
Amazing. So as we kind of wrap up here, what would you say is your number one tip for people looking to level up their points and miles game, whether to go to Switzerland or anywhere else?
I think come up with a goal. You always work better and work smarter when you have a goal. Once I heard that podcast of yours and made the decision of Switzerland is going to happen, it gave me specific, like, okay, this is the card I'm going to open. This is what I'm going to use the points for. I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to go after a shiny new welcome offer with some other card that doesn't make sense for this trip. Like, come up with that dream trip that you want to take and figure out what hotels are there, which points currency do you really need. I mean, obviously, flexible points are king, but what do you need for that specific dream that you want to take? And then work towards making it happen.
Incredible. So, Mary Ellen, if people have questions for you about this trip or anything else, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me online on Instagram at family travel for the win with the number 4. You can email us at wonderlandonpoints@gmail.com. I'd be happy to chat with you, answer questions through email. I do have an itinerary from the Switzerland trip. So if you're interested in planning that same trip or something similar, then I'm happy to send you that itinerary.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, this is really special for me because this trip was very meaningful to me, and it all started with your podcast.
That is so amazing. I really hope that 3 years from now, somebody else is on the podcast where they're like, I listened to Mary Ellen's episode and then I booked this thing in Switzerland, or they book this entire K-drama tour where they're like, I flew into Korea and then we went to all of these different sites. We went to Jeju Island. We saw the dolphins in Eternity Woo, all of those things. Somebody will do whale talk. It'll be such fun.
That's my next goal. I have never been to South Korea. I've been deep into, I mean, I have watched 100 of K-dramas. Like, I'm not a little fan. I'm a big fan, but I've never been to South Korea. So that's my next big bucket list travel goal.
I look forward to having you back on the show one day after you make it happen.
Thank you so much.